Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. On behalf of the Kurdistan Regional Government, I'd like to welcome you all to Kurdistan, and especially to Slēmani. I'm hopeful that you've had a good and productive day, and I'm also hopeful that you've witnessed or will witness while you are here firsthand our efforts at ending conflict, defending freedom from terror, protecting refugees, and promoting democracy, as is the fitting title of this forum. For Kurdistan today is embroiled in a most brutal conflict with ISIS. Our brave Peshmerga are defending Kurdistan, Iraq, and the rest of the world from the worst kind of terrorism. Kurdistan is currently home to nearly 2 million displaced people and refugees. And we are striving to continue the path towards democratization, all while trying to manage internal political divisions, geopolitical minefields, and most worrying of all, an unprecedented fiscal and economic challenge. Your presence here today and the assistance provided by the members of the coalition to counter and defeat Daesh are a constant reminder that we are not alone in facing some of these challenges. But as we seek to confront and overcome them, it is vital for us to be honest with ourselves and to be honest with you. The war with Daesh will not end with the liberation of Mosul. Within the next few months, we may hear the mission accomplished statement, either by the Iraqi Prime Minister, or by senior US military officials, or even perhaps by President Trump. And while, despite the difficulties that lie ahead, I don't foresee us collectively not being militarily victorious. But that is exactly when we face the beginning of the next chapter of the war against ISIS. ISIS is an Iraqi organization with roots in this country. Yes, they may have gained their battle experience in Syria, but we must remember that this group was active in Iraq way before it ever set foot in Syria and started amassing global support. No doubt their brand has since globalized. Social media, the internet, and their impressive propaganda created a global brand that was able to attract thousands of fighters from all corners of the globe. But the leadership, the core leadership, and those orchestrating attacks on the ground in Iraq are Iraqi. That is why a military victory, one where only territory is reclaimed from Daesh, to include their so-called capital, is not outright victory. Daesh did not fill a security vacuum in the country. It filled a political one. The challenge to end the current conflict is as much political as it is military. The combined efforts of the international coalition, Iraqi and Kurdish forces, is resulting in significant progress on the battlefield, but political progress in Iraq is lagging way behind. Iraqi forces will never be able to hold territory taken from ISIS unless the military track is quickly accompanied by a political one that addresses the core grievances throughout the country, one that addresses the fundamental question, can Iraq be saved, and if so, how? If, after military victory is declared, and the world's attention to Iraq dissipates, and Iraq goes back to business as usual, with more sectarianism and polarization, and we do not find a solution to the questions surrounding governance in the country, you can be sure that another bloody conflict will arise. Groups like Daesh, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram don't prosper in well-functioning and well-governed countries. They gain strength, popularity, and support in failed or failing states. Syria is a failed state. Iraq is a failing state. Billions of dollars spent on infrastructure, millions on civil society development, on democracy building, and look what there is to show for it. Very little, I'm afraid. You cannot buy democracy. Democracy must be nurtured. While dollars were ineffectively spent, what was even more badly spent was political influence. Development aid, financial assistance, and military support and financing was never tied to political development. It was never used to create a viable state in the country. I know there are many around the world, including perhaps many in this room, who are tired of Iraq. But Iraq is not going to get itself right on its own. And if we don't want to be here a few years from now discussing progress in the next war against Iraq or within Iraq, then it's time for interested countries around the world to look at Iraq for what it is, and more importantly, what it is not and what it will not be. The current system of governance and politics in Iraq has failed. Iraq, including Kurdistan, is facing enormous economic challenges too. 1/3 of the country has been politically, militarily, and economically devastated for over 12 years now. Can you just imagine that 15-year-old Sunni boy or girl from Anbar who has grown up for much of his or her life with war, poor government services, and little or no hope? For so long, the countries focused on Iraq have tried in vain to recreate an Iraq where the Iraqi identity supersedes the ethnic or religious one. That has not succeeded, and in this climate, it will not succeed. So instead of trying the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, instead of hoping that Iraqis can all of a sudden put aside their ethnic and their sectarian differences and all be good Iraqis from different backgrounds and beliefs, let us finally come to the realization that we need a new system of governance in this country, one that reflects the actual realities on the ground. Shiites will never allow Sunnis to govern Iraq again. Sunnis will never accept Shiite domination. And Kurds will never allow Arabs to rule them again. It's as simple as that. The only way I can imagine the current borders of Iraq remaining the same is by applying some sort of administrative and economic devolution. Otherwise, we must all brace ourselves for the end of the country. I personally do not think that the breakup of Iraq will lead to the end of the world. But those that want to fight for maintaining the current boundaries of the country need to engage with it in a different way. Global forces and key European allies are strategically placed to facilitate a debate within Iraq about the future of Iraq. What does decentralization look like? Is it a simple three-state solution? Is it a more complex asymmetric federation where different states have different levels of authority? Is it a confederation? A united Iraqi Emirates of sorts? The answers to these questions lie not with the global powers, but with Iraqis themselves. But without a little hand-holding, or should I say political coercion and forcefulness, that debate will never take place. Interested parties will need to overcome that fear of being labeled as interfering in the internal affairs of Iraq. They should foster that dialogue, facilitate an end state in Iraq that could prevent an end to the state of Iraq. The world must also stop fearing Kurdish independence aspirations. Kurdistan will become independent one day. Maybe not this year or the next, but it will happen. And I see it happening after an agreement with Baghdad, not with Turkey, Iran, or the US, or anyone else for that matter. Military success on the battlefield and a political solution to Iraq's long-standing issues are vital, and so is better governance. Without good governance, any success gleaned on the battlefield, as well as the fledgling political solutions, will not hold. While the whole country, but especially Kurdistan, is in the midst of an unseen economic hardships, now is the perfect time for reform. The economically booming and prospering Kurdistan of 2010 is today reeling from multiple shocks that have hit us hard. First to hit was Baghdad cutting our budget in 2014. Then came the war with ISIS, followed by wave after wave of Iraqis fleeing ISIS and the conflict. These shocks were further compounded by the fall of global oil prices. Kurdistan is now home to nearly 2 million displaced people. That is almost a 30% increase in our population. Europe thinks it has a refugee problem. Imagine for one moment, wherever you may be from, an overnight increase of 30% of your population. So the combination of Baghdad cutting our budget and the fall of oil prices the following year, along with already our large and dysfunctional bureaucracy and the load of IDPs on our political and economic system, has left us in Kurdistan with enormous debt and fiscal challenges. In January this year, we had a monthly operating deficit of over $460 million per month. We needed to act fast, and we did. Urgent austerity measures and a shift to direct oil exports have improved the government's immediate cash balance, while structural reforms have begun to tackle the long-term challenge of transforming the public sector and promoting diversification of our region's economy. However, Kurdistan continues to face an uphill battle to restore fiscal sustainability and restart economic growth. The lack of financing has exacerbated the social pressures inherent in any crisis response. And while scarce technical expertise imposes important hurdles to program design and implementation. We have received very little financial support and inadequate international assistance to deal with the financial and humanitarian situations that we have. We recognize the need for further austerity to close the gap between our revenues and our expenditures. That is why we announced a measure to withhold a significant percentage of government salaries, pensions and stipends, excluding those of the Peshmerga and the security services. These cuts have been sustained since, reducing the average total monthly payment by more than 1/3, from almost $750 million a month to approximately $450. This policy has understandably led to civil unrest within Kurdistan. We've also reduced non-salary operating expenditures by more than 50%. My government has also moved to increase non-oil revenues by raising fees, penalties, water charges, and electricity tariffs for industrial consumers, as well as by slashing petroleum product subsidies. The overall result has been an 80% drop in the consolidated fiscal deficit, measured on a cash basis from $6.5 billion in 2014 to an estimated $1.3 billion this year. Yet, still, we continue to struggle to pay monthly salaries, pensions, and stipends on time, despite these measures that we've taken. So in partnership with the World Bank, we have prepared a comprehensive roadmap for structural reform in the Kurdistan region. And within that framework, we are focused on priority areas that include the institutional modernization of our Ministry of Finance to equip the ministry to lead fiscal policy making and become a driver for reform. The program covers 5 reform streams: macro-fiscal reform, so as to establish a macro-fiscal framework to guide the formulation of annual budgets in Kurdistan. On customs, we've begun connecting our customs posts across the region to improve standards of service delivery, accelerate customs clearances, and provide real-time information on revenue collection. On tax, we will undertake a shift in procedure from presumptive taxation to self-assessment in line with international standards. On public finance management, we have begun to strengthen control over public spending while improving management of government liabilities. As a key step, a new chart of accounts compatible with international standards has been established. We have begun to register every single government wage earner in a biometric system. The registration process encompassing fingerprint scans, iris scans, and facial recognition software is now underway. After 3 weeks of actual operation, as of today, we have registered over 230,000 government wage earners. The result will be an identity management system that drives broader reform of government payroll and eventually human resources. Through this initiative, we will identify those who are unlawfully receiving more than one salary from the government, which we likely have many. We will also identify and eliminate ghost employees, of which we surely have many. Our electricity sector reform effort currently underway is aimed at achieving financial sustainability and improving the quality of service while greatly increasing private sector participation in distribution. To that end, our government is pursuing a 2-pronged strategy. The immediate goal is to cut costs and improve financial sustainability while developing a more medium-term reform plan in cooperation with the World Bank. But we recognize that enhancing government transparency and citizen engagement are key to building and sustaining popular support for our programs. Governance is never a popularity contest, and this is particularly true in situations of crisis. A cornerstone of our efforts is to increase transparency, and we've done this by introducing international audits to our oil and gas sector. Contracts with international auditors have now been signed and initial work is underway. The audits will cover oil exports, international oil companies and domestic company operations, including the local sales of crude and refined products. These reforms have the full support and direct engagement of the Prime Minister of the Kurdistan Regional Government, myself and key cabinet members. So looking at the broader picture, while the world is focused on war and turmoil in the Middle East, we are steadfastly addressing our own issues head-on, all the while being in the eye of the storm. While fighting a war, managing continued inflows of displaced people, navigating our own internal divisions, we are firmly tackling our massive economic challenges and forging ahead to secure Kurdistan's political and economic viability. As friends and partners support Kurdish and Iraqi forces engaged to defeat ISIS in Iraq, we must be clear that only by ensuring a politically and economically viable Iraq and Kurdistan, and by supporting progressive and democratic forces, can we cement the military victories won on the battlefield. And in order to attain that goal, we need your continued support and friendship. Only then can we say we've successfully defended our freedom, ended this conflict, and can continue along the path to prosperity and democracy. We have proven to be resilient in the face of adversity, resolute in delivering on our plans and vision, and unrelenting on the battlefield of war. And with your support during these difficult times, we will overcome today's challenges and forge lasting partnerships for prosperity. Thank you very much for inviting me. I wish you success going forward.